This is my friend BC. A few months ago, he tried to quit vaping. He was tired of spending money on vapes all the time, and he was feeling kind of controlled by nicotine, so he quit cold turkey. And he ended up getting some pretty gnarly anxiety symptoms. And that got me thinking, is there a better or even a best way to quit nicotine? If a perfect quitting process existed, it would be fast, it would be easy, it would be effective, and it would of course be safe. Right now, your current options are like quitting through sheer willpower, which isn't easy or really effective a lot of the times, and certainly not fast. You also have therapy as an option, which has its pros and cons, and medication, which isn't perfect either. So for 6 weeks, we tracked BC's nicotine use, his cravings, and his withdrawal symptoms. Then we identified behavioral cues and triggers and tried disrupting those triggers. Next, we're going to create replacement behaviors and rewards that will hopefully reduce cueing and therefore reduce craving and withdrawal symptom severity and create the easiest, fastest, most effective, and safest way of quitting nicotine ever. At least that's the idea. This is a video about BC's journey quitting nicotine so far. It's about what has worked and what hasn't, which might be useful for you if you are trying to quit nicotine or if you know someone trying to quit nicotine. And it's also about this kind of bigger idea of a way that we might be able to better treat addiction just overall, which I think is really, really cool. If you're new here, this is Wise Down Research Company. We're researching the neuroscience and psychology behind mental performance, especially for dudes. Essentially, we're researching the science of better. And beating an addiction is a great way to be better. Since we're gonna be talking about some substance abuse stuff today, I wanna say I'm not a doctor. I just do research on YouTube. This is not medical advice. Do not take it as medical advice, please. It's not medical advice. Every day, BC would send me a timetable of all the times he used nicotine that day, of all the cravings he had that day, and all his withdrawal symptoms for that day. And then I would put those into an Excel document so that we could see change over time. Weirdly enough, just the process of tracking his nicotine use was already helpful for BC. It adds this level of awareness that I think is really important and really powerful. You almost have to ask yourself, do I really need this right now? According to BC, that extra moment of awareness helped him start to take control back from his vape, which is a small but important win. So now BC is aware of his habits. That's important, but we can see from the data that it's not enough. BC, on average, hits his vape between 60 and 80 times per day, and those 60 to 80 hits are usually conglomerated isn't the word. What the fuck is the word? You know what I'm talking about? Centered? Hand in glove? That's not right. Crowded. No, that's not it. Intervals. Intervals. BC hits his vape between 60 and 80 times per day, usually in intervals of 15 to 20 hits, because that's how much it takes him to feel like satiated or to get his fill. He wakes up and before starting work, he hits his vape. Then he hits it again once or twice around lunchtime. After finishing work or getting home from the office, he hits his nicotine again. If he goes for a run or to the gym, he hits it after that as a reward, and then he always hits it before bed. And because we can see BC's patterns, we can also see his cues, which is like the crux of this whole thing. A cue tells your brain that a reward is coming. Right, so in this case, the reward is the dopamine release that nicotine causes in your brain. That's a reward. It feels good. And when your brain gets that reward, it takes a screenshot of your surroundings. So like it sees everything. Then every time you get that same reward again, your brain takes another screenshot. And eventually it has enough of those screenshots to kind of compare and see if there's anything that is consistent throughout every reward. So let's say you have a friend that always lets you hit his vape. Every time you hit the vape, he's gonna be in the screenshot. Your brain then labels him as a cue because he must have something to do with that reward. And now, whenever you see that guy, you start to crave nicotine because your brain is expecting the reward. Cues can be anything, right? Cues can be people, they can be places, they could even be emotions like boredom or anger. And cues have been shown to increase the intensity of cravings and drug-related behavior. So what that tells us is that cues can really impact your addiction, your environment. can impact your addiction. This whole idea and this video really is inspired by the work of Dr. Lee Robbins, who in 1971 was commissioned by the US Department of Defense to conduct a study about returning US veterans from Vietnam who were addicted to heroin. That was so much information at once. In Vietnam, in the Vietnam War, heroin was really, really popular among American soldiers. About 35% of soldiers tried heroin, and about 19% became addicted to heroin while serving in Vietnam. So the Department of Defense was like, this is gonna be an epidemic of heroin when these guys come back. But they were wrong. When those guys came back, only about 50% of the addicted veterans even tried heroin. And of that 50%, only about 12% became re-addicted. And if we compare those re-addiction and relapse rates to a study done in China showing that between 80 and 95% of heroin addicts relapse within the first year, we can see that something is really different. Some people have speculated that these low addiction rates might have been caused because soldiers have a completely different environment in Vietnam versus at home. Right? They're around different people and they're doing different things and they're feeling different emotions. Some people say that these soldiers left their heroin cues in Vietnam, which might have made it easier to quit heroin or never start again once they got home. So the idea is to change BC's environment or change the way he interacts with his environment so that his cues will also be like less intense and make it easier for him to quit. Notice that he hits his nicotine usually in bed or at his desk. Now that means that his bedroom is a big cue for him. Also, having the vape right in front of you is an obvious cue. If you see the vape, you're gonna wanna hit it. So I had BC move his vape to an obscure corner of his apartment. So if he wanted to take a hit, he'd have to walk to the corner, take his hits, leave it there, and walk back to continue his day. Two things happened. First, the vape was no longer in eyesight, so it was easier for him to just forget about it, and he saw his cravings start to go down. Second, BC's brain should have started to realize by now that his bed and his desk are no longer like sources of nicotine. And so it should start to weaken the association it has between nicotine reward and those places, which weakens the cue and hopefully over time weakens the cravings as well. I understand that by moving the vape to a different spot, you create a new cue, but I'd rather have the cue be in a place that you don't really spend a lot of time than in a place where he's spending literally like 80% of his day. According to BC, this started to work for him. He felt that it was easier to ignore or forget about his vape, and he kind of felt his cravings go down. But if we look at the data, we can see that it might have worked a little bit, but it's definitely not working enough for it to be a total success. So we have to do more. And that's as far as we got in 6 weeks, but this is what the next step is going to look like, because I think it's pretty cool. So we already talked about the fact that we know BC's patterns, so we know his cues, right? Let's pick a cue. Let's say when he finishes work and or comes home from work. That's a cue for him. From other research, kind of outside of the addiction world, things like Pavlovian impatience and delay discounting, I know that immediate rewards are really, really powerful. So I think that might apply to addiction as well. So when a cue happens and then the reward is immediate, that's probably a pretty strong cue. And maybe we could weaken the intensity of the cue and the craving by adding time between the cue and the reward. My idea is to create a new behavior and a new reward to attach onto that cue so that he has something else to do instead of grabbing nicotine. Instead of hitting nicotine, let's say, watch an episode of TV. And this reward is going to change based on who you are and what you like to do and all that stuff. You have to be careful here, though. You don't want to replace unhealthy with unhealthy. It'd be really easy to say, like, oh, instead of grabbing your vape, just go get a beer and a Big Mac. And probably not a net positive. So I think watching an episode of TV is like fine, just for this example. We have the cue and then we have the reward, but we need behaviors in between. So let's say you get home from work, take off your work clothes, put on comfy clothes or gym clothes, and sit down on the couch, pick a show, and then watch an episode of TV. That's the reward. So here's how this is gonna look, right? BC is going to come home from work and he's gonna crave nicotine. We know that That's the pattern. But he's going to wait as long as he can, and he's going to go through those actions that we've already laid out. And eventually he's going to get to his reward. Also, we add a reward at the end because you want a reason for your brain to repeat the action, right? If we were just to say, through sheer willpower, go as long as you can without hitting nicotine, your brain is thinking, well, that sucked for no reason, so we're not going to do that again. Having a reward at the end says, yeah, we could do that again. Like, there's a reason to repeat that action. Sometimes BC is not going to be able to last until the new reward. Sometimes he's going to hit his nicotine after some time. Sometimes he's going to get to the reward but still need the nicotine, whatever. The whole idea is to add distance, to give your brain something to do to distance the current cue coming home and the reward nicotine. Ideally, putting that time in there weakens the connection, and weakening the connection should weaken cravings, and then that makes it easier to quit, and suddenly we might have just created a better way to quit nicotine. Honestly though, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But nicotine's only getting more popular. We have 50 milligram pouches now, and we have vapes with flavored like strawberry razzmatazz that are definitely not marketed to kids. When I was in high school, middle schoolers, 12 and 13-year-olds were selling mango Juul pods in the bathroom. So this is not a problem that's going away. Y'all remember mango Juul pods? Crazy. Right now, and definitely in the future, there's gonna be a lot of us dudes who really desperately want to quit nicotine. And research like this hopefully helps. Until we get more data on BC, we also have studies going on goal achievement and confidence and discipline and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of ways to help dudes be better if they want to. And so if you like that vision and you had a good time watching this video, then the best way to support us is just to subscribe. And thanks to BC. And I still don't know how to end a video.